Can you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
All right, please have a seat. Can you state your full name and then just spell your last name for the record, please?
My name is Heather Gagnon, Gagnon.
And Ms. Gagnon, where are you from? Where do you live?
I live in Gorham, New Hampshire.
And how long have you lived there?
I've lived there for 7 years now.
7 years, okay. And what do you do for work?
I'm an advanced emergency medical technician with Gorham Fire and EMS.
Okay, so advanced emergency medical technician. Is there different levels?
Yes, there are 4 levels of professional EMS. There's emergency medical responder at the bottom, emergency medical technician, advanced EMT, and then at the top is paramedic.
Okay, and at the time we're going to be talking about, which is June of 2019, what level were you at that point?
I was an advanced EMT.
Advanced EMT, okay. And I apologize if I asked this. I don't know if it's because the morning's coming to an end here, but how long have you been an EMT?
I've been in EMS for 10 years.
For 10 years, okay. And was all of that with Gorham?
Most of it with Gorham, yes, but I've been with several other agencies as well.
Okay. What other agencies have you been an EMT?
I've been with Berlin Emergency Medical Services. I've also worked for Care Plus Ambulance, doing business as North Conway Ambulance, Caledonia Essex Ambulance Service out of St. Johnsbury, and I did have a brief stint at Stewart's Ambulance out of Meredith.
Okay, so I want to go back to June of 2019, kind of focus in on that time frame. So at that time frame, how did the scheduling or structure of Gorham EMS work?
So we ran on a model where we had staff in-house 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We had 3 full-time staff that filled most of those slots in the schedule. And then overnight, we did a backfill with our call department. People could choose to be on the schedule, but we're not required to do so.
Okay. So specifically on the evening of Friday, June 21st, 2019, do you remember that day?
Yes.
And do you remember how the staffing was scheduled for Gorham EMS?
I don't remember.
Okay. Was it full-time at that time frame, 24/7?
It was not.
Okay. And so you had described it would be some sort of on-call type system then?
Yes.
And so how are you notified if a call comes in?
So at the time, we were notified mostly through, most of us carried pagers on our person. We also had a software, I believe, that we had at the time as well, and still do, called eDispatches as well. It's an app that runs through the phone that you can opt into, but again, personnel weren't required to go through that option.
Okay. And then how does mutual aid, can you describe for us what mutual aid is and how it works up here in the North Country?
So mutual aid is, it can be fairly formal or fairly informal, like we have kind of more so up in the North Country. There can be written agreements, but we mostly run through, I guess what you would refer to kind of as like a handshake agreement. So if for some reason, like in Gorham in particular, if we couldn't staff an ambulance, or if we needed more resources than we had readily available, we would, call and request assistance from neighboring agencies. And then, they would respond if they were able to do so, but they weren't obligated.
Okay. And so, fair to say some of the smaller towns that surround Gorham and Berlin may not have full-time fire and EMS as well?
That's correct.
So if a call comes in that town, is that something you may go and assist with?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to talk to you specifically at about 6:26, around that time, on June 21st, 2019. Did you receive an EMS call?
Yes, not me personally. I ended up kind of in this mix later on.
Okay.
But the agency did get the call, yes.
And did you eventually end up hearing the tone and responding?
Yes, I did.
And where were you coming from?
I also moonlight at the Omni Mount Washington. I have another kind of side job there. I was going through the area and saw, several vehicles from my agency. heading out of town. And then, when I got home and heard my pager upstairs, that's when I became aware of the incident.
Okay, so you're at work, you came home, you heard the pager, and then what did you do from there?
So from there, just, there was a high number of calls coming into to dispatch. There was a pretty high radio traffic volume. Normally we sign on with our dispatchers as to which individual personnel are signing on for the call. But with all of the radio traffic, I just, went directly to the station just to kind of see who was there.
And when you arrived at the station, did you get an ambulance and go, or what happened once you got there?
So EMT Bosno was also at the station at the same time that I was myself. We had also heard through the airwaves that Captain Dustin was also en route as well from Berlin. And at that point, we kind of had a kind of a quick moment of what do we do, mostly on the premise that we were running out of resources. They were being depleted pretty quickly at the time of the incident, not just for our town, but for the area as well. So we ultimately decided to contact Captain Dustin via telephone and just to kind of make a plan from there. Ultimately, we awaited Captain Dustin's arrival. It was probably about 5 minutes or so, give or take. And that also helped in case we needed to prepare for more critically injured people, and we had those full advanced life support capabilities if necessary.
Okay. Without going into the details, at this point, with what you're hearing over the airwaves, did you have a pretty good idea that it was a serious crash or a serious incident you'd be responding to?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And so if I'm understanding what you're saying, there's kind of two things at play. Other ambulances are going to the scene.
Yes.
And you are concerned that there may be other calls that you have to respond to as well?
Yes.
Okay. And so you wait for the supervisor, Captain Dustin, to
Correct.
arrive? Okay. And do you eventually, after Captain Dustin arrives, do you respond to the scene?
Yes, we do.
Do you remember what time you arrived on the scene?
Not immediately at the top of my head, no. I did reference it in my report.
Okay. And how does that work? Do you do some form of report after an EMS call?
Yes. After every EMS call, every incident that we get dispatched to, we do have an online database through the state that we do write our reports for.
Okay. And if you reviewed that report, would that help refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Okay. And that's where 3808 to 3808. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
What is this?
This is my Tempsus report that I had generated for this incident in particular.
Okay. So specifically, I want to point you down here.
Yes.
And if you can just review that section, I'm at 3802.
Yeah.
Just let me know after you've had a chance to review it.
Yes.
Okay, you've had a chance to review it. Does that help refresh your recollection?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so about what time did you arrive on scene?
We arrived at 19:04, 7:04 p.m.
Okay, and what was it like when you arrived on scene?
If I had to put it in one word, chaos. There was, there were there was just vehicles all over the road because, going through the Route 2 corridor, there's not really many places for them to go. There were lots of people walking around. There were just, motorcycles, debris, people everywhere. Just sights, smells, sounds, everywhere.
Okay. Was it calm and organized when you got there?
No, it was not.
Okay. Did you, after you arrived, did you end up having any contact with any patients?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And do you remember what time you had contact with that first patient?
We had contact with our patient around 1906.
Okay.
7:06 p.m.
So you arrived at 7:04, and 2 minutes later, you're having contact with this patient.
That's correct.
Okay. And as you approached the patient, what were your observations about the patient?
So for my patient in particular, we were directed by EMS personnel from Jefferson to this individual, and this gentleman was very emotionally distraught, hysterical. He was yelling, he was like, he had tears in his eyes, just, shouting, pacing, couldn't sit still.
So did you ended up approaching this patient and talking with this patient?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And do you remember what that patient told you?
Yes.
And again, if you need to refresh your recollection.
Of course. So when we made contact with our patient, usually I like to start my my calls, my assessments, just by kind of getting a general idea as to what's been going on, or kind of how this gentleman, these patients kind of get to where they are now. And this patient said that he was on his motorcycle heading eastbound into Gorham, going to a charity event, when a pickup truck came by, crossed into the eastbound lane, cleaning out several motorcycles. He himself avoided collision by going into the eastbound shoulder and laying the bike down into the grass.
Okay. And did he have any medical conditions that he complained of?
He complained of right shoulder pain at the time, yes.
Okay. And did he end up getting transported to the hospital?
He did not.
And was that his choice or your choice?
That was his choice.
Okay. And did you advise him whether or not he should go to the hospital for medical treatment?
You have to reproach.
You may.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gagnon. So going back to that patient that you evaluated, did you document his name?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember that name?
Yes, his name was David Bark.
Okay. David Bark was the patient that you discussed about the shoulder pain and made that statement.
That's correct.
Okay. So after you evaluated Mr. Bark, what did you do after that?
After we evaluated Mr. Bark, we did advise him of potential complications with refusal, up to including his death and or permanent disability, to which he was able to verbalize his understanding.
Same objection, Your Honor.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, and EMT Gagnon, I apologize.
Yeah.
But just your actions after assessing and interacting with Mr. Bark.
Yes, I apologize.
That's okay.
We reported back to Fire Command for further assignment.
Okay. Did you have any other further contact with any of the other motorcyclists or victims that day?
No, I did not. It was mostly monitoring other bystanders at that point.
Thank you, Ms. Gagnon. I have no further questions. Defense counsel will have some. Thank you.
Thank you.
Defense counsel may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, Ms. Gagnon.
Good morning.
When you meet with a patient at a scene like that, I mean, you're not there as a law enforcement officer, right?
That's correct.
You're not there as an investigator.
No, sir.
The details of what happened are not of particular concern to you, right?
Correct.
When you ask this patient what happened, it's just to get an understanding of the general parameters of the event, right?
That's correct.
So you didn't follow up with any questions to him
No, sir.
about the details. You had no reason to.
No.
So you didn't ask him, for example, where he saw the truck at what point?
No, I did not.
Before impact, or what angle it might have been going at,
No, sir.
or how far it was from him when it came over the line?
No, I did not.
No, you had no reason to ask any of that.
No.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you.
May the witness be excused?
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, you can step down, you're excused, thank you.
Thank
State may
you.
call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call Lieutenant Jay O'Leary.
You may.
Could you please raise your right hand, sir? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Please have a seat. Lieutenant O'Leary, it's up to you. You can have a mask on. If you do want to wear a mask, we just ask that you put a clear mask on. Otherwise, you can take your mask off.
Thank you.
Okay. Lieutenant O'Leary, can you just state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
James O'Leary, O''Leary.
And where do you work, Lieutenant O'Leary?
I work for the Division of State Police,
And how long have you worked for state police?
14 years.
14 years. Did you work anywhere before New Hampshire State Police for law enforcement?
I did. I worked for Highway Patrol for 3 years, which eventually merged with State Police in 2008.
Okay. And Highway Patrol is another state law enforcement agency?
That's correct.
Okay. And what is your current assignment with New Hampshire State Police?
I'm the troop commander for Troop G in Concord.
And let's back up a little bit. What have some of your other assignments been with New Hampshire State Police?
Some of my other assignments prior to this one, I was assigned to the Major Crime Unit. I was a part-time collision analysis and reconstruction individual. I worked with them. And prior to that, I worked back again at Troop G. So I spent about 13 years at Troop G.
Okay. And so you said the Major Crime Unit.
Excuse me.
What types of cases do they investigate?
Major Crime Unit investigates homicides, suspicious deaths, violent assaults, missing persons, things like that.
Okay. And then you also said the Collision Analysis Unit, you worked part-time for them as well?
Correct.
And is that the Crash Reconstruction Unit for State Police?
That's correct.
All right. And generally, I want to focus in on the car, you call it the car unit, correct?
Yes. Yep.
I just want to focus in a little bit on that. What was generally your role when you assisted the car unit?
So given my assignment to the Major Crime Unit, because it's so demanding, I would essentially work as assisting them in interviews or blood draws, diagramming, sketches, things like that. So essentially ancillary duties, not primary duties.
Okay. So for major crime, you may do some primary duties, but when you're working part-time for the car unit, it's the ancillary documentations.
Correct.
Okay. I want to take you back to Friday, June 21st, 2019. Were you assigned to assist with an investigation on Route 2 in Randolph?
I was.
And what was your role in that investigation?
I was asked to diagram the vehicles that were involved in the crash, as well as the location of victims' bodies, and record registration information attached to those vehicles.
Okay. And we're saying diagram here. What type of diagramming were you actually doing when you were on the scene?
It was a hand sketch diagram.
Okay. So was it to just give a general idea of what locations vehicles were?
Correct.
You weren't taking measurements?
Correct. It was not to scale. It was just essentially to kind of give a general basis of where the vehicles and bodies were located.
Okay, thank you. And did you also assist with documenting any of the vehicles after that day?
I did. I assisted in the post-crash inspection.
And what's the post-crash inspection?
A post-crash inspection is conducted as a result of a collision that occurs, and essentially it's to document the condition of the vehicles, whether through, usually through photographs and things like that, and documenting measurements to see if there may have been mechanical contributor to the crash.
Okay. And when you were doing the post-crash inspection, was it your role to document or to make those determinations?
It was my role to document, photograph.
So going back to June 21st, 2019, where did you respond from?
I responded.
I apologize. What area? I just didn't want you to put your personal home address.
Fair enough. I responded from the Concord area.
Okay. And about what time did you arrive on scene, roughly?
I arrived approximately 8:30 p.m.
And where did you park when you arrived on scene?
So I came from 115 and then went up Route 2, so I parked on the western end of the scene closest to the Mount Jefferson Motel.
And what did you see when you first arrived on scene?
I saw a large number of emergency personnel, saw motorcycles strewn across the roadway, some debris, there was bodies. Yeah, that was what I saw.
And as you first get there and you're looking at this, as you're looking at this scene, does it look like a condensed scene, kind of medium-sized scene? Does it seem like it's stretched out? How does it look as far as the size of this scene?
So this was a large scene from beginning to end, and wide in the sense of, where motorcycles were located off into, grassy areas or victims' bodies.
So what did you do when you first arrived to understand what's going on with this scene?
Yeah, my initial action after I got out of my cruiser was to essentially walk the scene from one end to the other to kind of get an idea of where it began, where it ended, kind of get an idea where debris or victims were located to see just about the size of the area we were dealing with.
And as you're walking through all this, does this seem like this is going to be complex, straightforward, just another crash scene that you've been to? What's your interpretation of the scene?
This scene was more complex than others. Typically, the scenes that I have been to are self-contained. You have two cars that kind of crash into each other. Victims typically stay inside the vehicle, suffer internal injuries. In this case, obviously, the victims were not found that way. They suffered catastrophic injuries, and that's how it differed.
And just one second. When you arrived on scene, were there other law enforcement officers on scene?
There were.
Okay. And how was the scene secured, or was it secured?
So from the end that I arrived on, from the 115 to Route 2 intersection, there were emergency personnel there with some cones, essentially blocking the road to be able to travel up Route 2. I was able to go through the roadblock because I had my emergency lights activated, and the remainder of traffic was diverted down Route 2.
You said your role was to document locations of victims as well as motorcycles or vehicles, correct?
Correct.
And how was your system? How did you go about doing that, given the scene that you had?
So I just use a piece of paper, an 8x11 notebook page, and I started at one end and just drew out kind of like what the roadway looked like, and went from one vehicle to the next, just a rough sketch of the direction it was facing, the registration that was attached to it, and kind of noting where the victims' bodies were located as well.
And how else was the scene documented by investigators?
The scene was documented through photographs, through the use of a total station, which is a device that essentially the user uses to map points of different items, and uses that to develop a diagram, a scaled diagram from. And we used our UAV, which is just our drone, state police drone.
And were you involved in operating the drone or the total station?
I was not.
Were there a significant amount of photographs taken?
There were, to my recollection, there were a couple of people running cameras when I arrived, or shortly thereafter.
So there were people taking photographs while you were there?
Yes.
All right. I'm not going to ask you about every single photo, but we're going to go through several of those now, if we could dim the lights, possibly. So first, Lieutenant O'Leary, I think it makes sense to go through some photographs just in general as a walkthrough.
Okay.
So this is State's Exhibit 145. What are we looking at here? What direction are we looking? What are we generally looking at?
Okay, so this would be from the Gorham end, looking towards the Jefferson end of Route 2. So where you can see the blue lights way off in the distance there, that would be the area in which I parked my cruiser. That's not my cruiser specifically, but that would be the area where I parked it. So this is going to be the eastern portion of the crash.
And moving forward, this is State's 111. Is this just zoomed in a little? We've kind of taken a step forward?
Correct.
All right. And moving along, again, this is State's Exhibit 112. And again, we just moved a little bit more forward.
Correct.
And as you were walking through the scene, did you notice any of the debris and liquids that we're seeing?
I did. So there was debris from motorcycles, and there was blood from victims. There was flesh from body parts, roadway tire markings, and scrapes that I noticed.
And so moving forward, State's 113. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, we're moving forward as well?
We are.
And so we're still looking back down towards that cruiser that you pointed out with the blue lights on?
That's correct.
And you had mentioned roadway markings. Can you see any of the roadway markings in this photograph?
Yes, there's some tire marks that go kind of underneath the fire truck across over to the eastern lane there, and next to the motorcycle as well.
And then continuing on, State's Exhibit 114, are those the marks you were just talking about?
That's correct.
And to the left, the kind of upper left, what is that we can see? You can zoom in if that helps.
Sure. That part that's way at the top left there is going to be the rear portion of the trailer that was operated by the defendant.
Okay. So moving on to State's 116. Again, is this moved forward just a little bit, still looking down towards that same cruiser?
It is.
And the trailer that you just pointed out, that's on the left, correct?
That's correct.
Again, moving forward, State's 116. What's the position that we're looking at now? What direction and what can we see?
So now we're looking towards Gorham. This would be the area that I arrived in and walked in from.
Okay, so I'm going to just go back real quick. So this way is facing towards Lancaster or towards 115, and then this next photograph, now we're kind of turned around and we're looking back.
That's correct.
All right. So moving forward to State's 117, is this again, are we following that path that you were talking about when you were talking about walking through the scene down and back?
Correct.
And moving forward a little bit more to State's 118. Again, is this the direction that we started with, but looking back towards where we started from?
Yes.
Now, State's Exhibit 119, still continuing on.
Yes.
And on the left, excuse me, just for the record, what can we see on the left side of that photograph? The whole kind of left side.
the left side where the fire truck is?
The fire truck itself, yes, we can see a fire truck on the left-hand side.
Sorry, yes.
That's, that's fine. So as we look at this photograph, we have we have 2 lanes of traffic we can see.
Correct.
So the one on the right, you said that's facing towards Gorham,
Right,
so that would be the eastbound lane,
correct,
and the fire truck is in the westbound lane.
correct.
All right. Again, continuing on, States Exhibit 120. What can we see on the right-hand side? I know it's,
Yeah, so that there is an image of some flesh that came from one of the victims, along with some blood.
and then as we move on, States Exhibit 132. What direction are we looking at in this photograph?
So we're looking back towards Lancaster.
And we can still see that truck that you pointed out earlier, correct?
Correct, all the way down at the end on the left.
Continuing on, States 133. You had mentioned roadway markings and blood on the road. Do you see any of that in this photograph?
On bottom left, you can see that there's some blood from the victims. There's some tire marks and some scrapes.
And again, looking in a little bit more closely on that, this is States 134. Is that that scrape that was in that last photograph? I can go back, we can see. Is that
Yeah.
the scrape that's right in that center part?
That's correct.
And States Exhibit 121, what direction is this facing?
That's facing towards Lancaster.
Okay. And so that gives us an idea of the overview, just general overview of this crash. Did the car unit develop a diagram at all for this scene?
Yes,
And have you looked at that diagram before?
I did.
All right, so what I want to do is I want to use that diagram. It's been entered as States Exhibit 168, and I want to use that diagram to help us understand what each motorcycle was and who it belonged to.
Okay.
So this is States Exhibit 168. Is this the diagram we were talking about?
It is.
And can you just help orient us into kind of general directions, which way is which?
Sure, if you're at the left part of this diagram here is where the truck and trailer was found, so that's on the western portion of where the crash occurred, and then on the other side is the eastern portion, like towards Gorham.
Okay. And was a legend made? We can see, it's hard to see, but is each motorcycle and victim labeled in this diagram?
Correct, yes.
And was a legend created that basically says who was identified in each position and what motorcycle was identified?
It was.
And have you reviewed that as well?
I have.
And the jurors will have an opportunity to review this during deliberations physically, but is this what that diagram legend looks like? This is States Exhibit 169?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's start on the far right. And actually, as we look at this legend, we can see that there's a V1 through V7, and we can see there's a B1 through B13, correct?
Correct.
I noticed that V1 is labeled Al Maza,
Yes.
and I noticed that B1 is not registered to Al Maza. Can you explain why there's a V1, but it's not associated with B1?
Sure. So when we documented the vehicles and the victims, we started on one end and worked our way to the other. So Mr. Ribeiro's motorcycle was first in that line, and we just proceeded down.
And then did you do the same thing with the victims?
That's correct.
Documenting. So going back to the diagram, we can start on the far right with B1 or Bike 1. Who was this motorcycle registered to?
I was registered to Mr. Ribeiro.
And moving on to States 15, do you see Mr. Ribeiro's motorcycle in this photograph?
I do. So the motorcycle that's up in the grassy area up near the guardrail that's laying on its left side with the rear lights illuminated.
And we'll take a zoom in. This is States Exhibit 17. Is this that motorcycle you just pointed out in the grass?
It is.
And for States Exhibit 18, what are we looking at here?
And that's the front of the bike.
And you see any damage, or did you notice any damage to this motorcycle?
The front fender over the tire is damaged.
And just help where, I mean, so now we're looking back towards the cabins.
Correct.
And State's Exhibit 16, is this another photograph of that motorcycle?
It is.
All right. And moving back to the diagram, if we move on to Bike 2, who was B2 or Bike 2 registered to?
Mr. Mazza.
And State's Exhibit 19, can you see generally where Mr. Mazza's motorcycle was located?
Yeah, so it's going to be the black bike that's laying down on the ground in front of the yellow bike that's upright.
Okay. We're going to move forward a little bit. We can stop taking pictures of the exhibits for a second. This is State's Exhibit 135. Is this that motorcycle you just found, pointed out?
It is.
And is that how the motorcycle was found when it was documented?
It was.
And we can see what appears to be towels or colored blankets to the right.
Mhm.
What or who was underneath those towels or blankets?
That was a victim later identified as Mr. Mazza.
Okay. And, sir, stop taking photographs. The exhibits that we point out, please. Thank you. Moving forward, this is State's Exhibit 20. Is this another angle of that motorcycle?
It is.
And again, this is how the motorcycle was found when it was documented.
Correct.
And State's Exhibit 22, did that document the license plate?
That's the rear portion of his bike, yes.
Okay. And so what did you do when you had the license plate? What did you do, or how were you able to use the license plate to document whose motorcycle was whose?
So after I recorded all of the registrations that were attached to the motorcycles, I ran them through our spots, which is essentially our query on registrations, to obtain the information of the owners of the bikes. There was one, however, Mr. Perry's vehicle that was burned beyond recognition in the sense of it didn't have, the registration plate was no longer visible, and so we needed to identify that eventually through the VIN number on the bicycle, or on the motorcycle rather.
Okay. So all but one of the motorcycles, you were able to use the license plate itself?
Correct.
Okay. And moving on to State's Exhibit 21, is this the other side of that motorcycle?
It is.
And now you said that you also took photographs or helped document post-crash inspection.
Yes. Mhm.
Did you do post-crash inspections of all of these vehicles? As far as documenting them post-crash?
Did I personally document all of them?
Did the car unit?
The car unit did, yeah.
Yeah. And again, I'm not going to go through every one of those photographs, but this is State's Exhibit 24. Is this that same motorcycle?
It is.
And was this taken during that post-crash inspection?
It was.
And moving forward, State's Exhibit 25. We can see that license plate number, is that the same one that was in the photograph that we saw roadside?
That's correct.
And again, moving along, State's Exhibit 23, is this a photograph of the left side?
That's
of Mr.
correct.
Mazza's motorcycle?
Right, correct.
And a close-up of State's Exhibit 26, is this a close-up of that same motorcycle?
It is.
And moving over just a little bit, State's Exhibit 27, is this that same side of the motorcycle, the left side?
It's the left side.
Okay. So let's move on to the next motorcycle. Let's talk about Bike 3 or B3. Who was that motorcycle registered to?
That motorcycle was registered to Mr. Bark.
And State's Exhibit 30, is this Mr. Bark's motorcycle?
Yes, it is.
And State's Exhibit 28, is this another photograph of Mr. Bark's motorcycle?
It's the bottom of his motorcycle.
And specifically, we're not talking about the kind of yellow one we can see on the right, we're talking about
It's the black
right in
one.
the center.
Correct.
And again, State's Exhibit 29, is this the front of Mr. Bark's motorcycle?
That's correct.
And as far as for a post-inspection crash photo, this is State's Exhibit 144. Is this that same motorcycle? We can see the registration plate in the lower right-hand side.
Yes.
Okay. And now, Moving forward to B4 or Bike 4. Who was the registered owner of Bike 4?
Mr. Hooker?
And Mr. Hooker, was that William Hooker?
Yes.
And states 33. Whose motorcycle was that?
It's Mr. Hooker's.
So that's Bike 3. And states exhibit 32. Is this the back of Mr. Hooker's motorcycle?
It is.
And states 31. Is this are we standing on the roadway looking off to the side of Mr. Hooker's motorcycle?
Correct.
So moving along to Bike 5. Who was the registered owner of Bike 5?
Mr. Moran?
This is States Exhibit 34. If you can not forward this, please. Looking at the kind of top center of this photograph, there's a motorcycle. Whose motorcycle is that?
That's Mr. Moran's.
And this is States Exhibit 35. Is this another angle of that motorcycle?
It is.
I want to move around to the other side of that motorcycle to States Exhibit 36. Is this the back looking forward of Mr. Moran's motorcycle?
That's correct.
And again, there were post-crash inspections photographed of this motorcycle as well, correct?
Yes.
So looking at States 37, was this Josh Moran's motorcycle?
It is.
And this photograph, not the exact date, but how soon after the crash was this photograph taken?
Approximately a week.
And just generally, just for the record, can you describe what you're kind of seeing generally for damage here?
The headlight and front fairings damaged. The whole left side has some damage to it as well. That's pretty substantial. The front fender has substantial damage as well.
And is that a handlebar hanging down there?
That's what it appears to be.
And then moving on to States Exhibit 38. Is this a close-up of that left side of Mr. Moran's motorcycle?
That's correct.
And then looking at the other side, States Exhibit 142. Is this the other side of Mr. Moran's motorcycle?
Correct.
Did it appear one side had more damage than the other side?
The left side.
Okay. Let's move west a little bit further, and let's talk about bike number 6. Who was the registered owner of bike number 6?
Miss Brinley.
And is that Dawn Brinley?
Correct.
This is States Exhibit 39. Which motorcycle in this photograph is Dawn Brinley? Can you describe where it is?
Yep, so it's going to be the one that's on the left side there that's facing towards us with the marker lights illuminated.
And States Exhibit 40, is that another photograph of the motorcycle?
It is.
And moving to the back, States Exhibit 41, same motorcycle?
Same motorcycle.
And finally for Miss Brinley, States Exhibit 42, same motorcycle?
Bottom of the motorcycle.
And moving on to bike number 7. Who was the registered owner of bike number 7?
Mr. Pereira.
This is States Exhibit 45. What motorcycle, and we can see 2 motorcycles, which motorcycle is Mr. Pereira's?
It's the one that's, the yellow one that's in the front there.
Okay, and again, I know I've been clicking through a lot of motorcycle photos here, so as far as orientation, is that the truck? I know the lighting's a little difficult. Is that the truck in the upper left-hand corner?
That's correct.
And so that would mean that Lancaster's that direction and Gorham's behind us?
Right, we're looking at Lancaster there.
Okay. And, I apologize, the wrong button. So States Exhibit 46, what are we looking at here and what direction are we facing?
That's the rear portion of Mr. Pereira's motorcycle, and we're facing Gorham.
And then we can kind of see the lighting in the photographs here. We can see more headlights. Is it getting darker?
It
while
is.
this continuing?
Correct, yes.
And did it get darker while you were in fact there?
It did.
Moving along to States Exhibit 47. Is this another angle of Mr. Pereira's motorcycle?
That is.
The next one. This is States Exhibit 43. What can we see in this photograph?
Mr. Pereira's motorcycle is that yellow one that's near the center line, laying on its left side.
Okay. And directly in front of us, we can see a person lying on the ground. Is that Mr. Pereira?
That's correct.
And moving forward to bike 8 or motorcycle number 8, who is the registered owner of that motorcycle?
Mr. Lewis?
Is that Stephen Lewis?
Correct.
This is State's Exhibit 49. Is this Mr. Lewis's motorcycle?
It is.
And again, we can see that truck and trailer, so for orientation, again, Lancaster would be to the right, Gorham is behind us.
That's correct.
State's Exhibit 50, is this another angle of that motorcycle?
It's the rear portion.
And moving on to State's Exhibit 51, is that another angle of Mr. Lewis's motorcycle?
That's correct.
And 52, is that another photograph of Mr. Lewis's motorcycle?
It is.
And it looks like that yellow piece does not belong with Mr. Lewis's motorcycle?
That's part of Mr. Pereira's bike.
Okay. And at this point, it looks like it's fully dark out,
Yes.
and you're using some sort of other lighting to light up the scene?
Yes. Yep.
Moving down near the truck itself, who is the registered owner of Bike 9 or B9?
Mr. Perry?
And if my recollection is correct, that's the motorcycle you said you could not see the license plate,
That's correct.
and you used a VIN number to document this motorcycle.
Correct.
So this is State's Exhibit 56, and there's a yellow box that I just brought up. Is that Mr. Perry's motorcycle?
It is.
And State's Exhibit 55, what are we looking at here?
That's Mr. Perry's motorcycle. That's on the bottom right.
In front of the truck right there.
Correct.
And State's Exhibit 57,
Again, Mr. Perry's motorcycle.
and there was some photographs taken during the post-crash inspection as well, correct?
Correct.
This is State's Exhibit 54. Is this Mr. Perry's motorcycle?
Correct.
After it was removed?
Yes.
And this looks to be what side of the motorcycle?
That's going to be the left side, I believe.
And State's Exhibit 53, same motorcycle looking from the back left?
Correct.
So let's move over a little bit from Bike 9 and talk about Bike 10. This motorcycle was registered to who?
Mr. Core?
Is that Edward Ford?
Yes.
This is State's Exhibit 58. Can you see in this photograph where the motorcycle is?
So the blue motorcycle that's on its side under the right front portion of the pickup truck is Mr. Core's motorcycle.
So if I zoom in here, is that motorcycle we're talking
It
about?
is. That is, yep.
And moving on to State's Exhibit 59. Again, is that the motorcycle that was registered to Mr. Core?
It is.
And I know it's going to be difficult to probably see the next photograph with the lighting, but is that the same area in Mr. Core's motorcycle documented in State 60?
Yeah, that's the front portion with the bumper of the pickup truck over on the right.
And finally, for his motorcycle, State's Exhibit 61? Same motorcycle?
Same motorcycle.
So let's move across the road. Who was the registered owner of bike number 11?
Mr. Hayward?
Douglas Hayward?
Yes.
And this is State 62. Is this that motorcycle?
Yes.
And for State's Exhibit 63, is this the back of that motorcycle documenting the registration plate?
It is.
So moving a little bit further east, who was the registered owner of motorcycle number 12?
Mr. Thompson?
Dana Thompson?
Correct.
And State's Exhibit 64, is this Mr. Thompson's motorcycle?
It is.
And finally, for his motorcycle, State's Exhibit 65, is that documenting the license plate of Mr. Thompson's?
It is.
And finally, moving to the defendant's, the area of the defendant's trailer, who was the registered owner of Bike 13?
Mr. Ferrazzi?
So So looking at State's Exhibit 69, where was Mr. Frazee located as we look at this photograph?
So if you look at the rear portion of the trailer, he was located under the axle of the trailer.
So I'm gonna point, is that the area?
That's correct.
So that's where Mr. Frazee was found?
Correct.
So State's Exhibit 70, is this a photograph of that axle?
It is.
We're discussing?
Yes.
And underneath the axle, what are we looking at there?
That's Mr. Frazee's motorcycle.
And State's Exhibit 72, is this that same area?
It is.
And State's Exhibit 71, where's this photograph?
That's going to be under the axle. That's the front of his motorcycle.
How, or actually, excuse me, let me back up. Were post-crash inspection photos taken of this motorcycle as well?
Yes.
How were you able to get Mr. Frazee's motorcycle out from underneath the trailer?
The same way that we had to get Mr. Frazee from underneath the trailer. We used a forklift that one of the tow companies brought to lift the rear of the trailer and removed the victim and the bike.
And this is State's Exhibit 68. Is this Mr. Frazee's motorcycle?
It is.
And State's Exhibit 66. Is this, what side of Mr. Frazee's motorcycle are we looking at here?
That appears to be the right side.
And State 67. How about this photograph?
The front?
And finally, for Mr. Frazee's motorcycle, this is State's Exhibit 143. Is this the left side?
It is.
All right, finally, let's talk about the defendant's truck and trailer. We already saw this photograph. This is State's Exhibit 58. I'd just like to go through some 360 or kind of walk around photographs of the vehicle itself. So this is just for the purposes of a record, is this the right side of that truck and trailer?
That's
Passenger side?
That's correct.
And State's Exhibit 59, we start to move around towards the front.
That's the front portion of the truck.
And then, again, for the record, State's Exhibit 55, what can we see in this photograph?
Front portion of the truck and part of the driver's side.
And can we zoom in on that right? Did you notice anything about the, up a little bit, right there? Did you notice anything about this, what's documented or what we zoomed in on here?
Yeah, so the left front tire from the truck is no longer on the rim, and it's resting against the trailer.
I'm showing you what's been previously entered as State's Exhibit 130. Does this appear to be a tire with blowout on the side?
Yes.
And moving along to State's Exhibit 124, have we now moved along to the driver's side of the truck?
That's correct.
And continuing on, State's Exhibit 125. Again, is this just kind of stepped back looking at the truck and trailer?
Correct, on the driver's side.
And moving to State's Exhibit 126, looking at the truck and trailer from the road.
Correct.
And State's Exhibit 127, the right rear corner of the trailer.
Correct.
And what can we see along the roadway underneath the trailer right there?
Yeah, again, so there's some debris, some tire marks, and some scraping.
And continuing on to State's Exhibit 128, what can we see here?
That's the rear portion of the pickup truck and the right side of the trailer.
And post-crash inspection done of this vehicle as well?
Yes.
And photographs were taken?
Correct.
Documented. All right. So State's Exhibit 141, is this the start of the trailer on the driver's side or the passenger side?
That's the start of the trailer on the driver's side, where it connects to the truck.
All right, so moving down, State's Exhibit 140, looks a little continuing down the trailer, is this the driver's side or the passenger side?
It's the driver's side.
And States Exhibit 138, right rear corner, driver's side.
Left rear quarter, driver's side.
Thank you for
Yep.
correcting me. And States Exhibit 137, looking from the back to the front, to where the truck is.
That's correct.
And I know it's hard to see there. Truck, just so that, again, so we can see the trailer and then we can see the truck in front of that.
That's correct.
Okay. And continuing on to States Exhibit 136, passenger side of the truck.
Correct.
And then States Exhibit 131, is this the front passenger side of the truck looking back?
That's correct.
Lieutenant O'Leary, what else did you help do on the scene that evening?
I helped remove the victims' bodies from their locations and stage them in an area to be cataloged and moved for transportation by the ADME.
Okay. And just generally, what was your role actually in that process?
Essentially locating the victims and removing them from where they were and putting them to a location that we were staging all of them.
And what was the system for documenting the victims' locations?
So I didn't document any of the victims as far as names or corresponding information. I simply lifted the individuals to be moved and put them in the staging area. And then the ADME worked to try to locate identification for them.
Okay. And you said ADME, what's an ADME?
The Assistant Deputy Medical Examiner.
Okay. And do they assist the medical examiner's office in identifying victims and autopsies?
Correct.
Okay. Lieutenant O'Leary, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I
Thank
have
you.
no further questions defense counsel may have some.
Counsel, approach a moment. Members of the jury, before defense counsel questions this witness, we're going to recess for lunch. Again, we'll break for an hour and 15 minutes. Plan to be back about 1:15. Again, during the recess, please do not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anybody else, and please make every effort to avoid being exposed to any information having to do with this case, the witnesses, the attorneys, and the parties through any form of media, social media, the internet, or otherwise. Jurors may be excused.
All right.